some of the words I stumbled upon while researching about our next speaker, Mr. Sumantra Basu. Mr. Basu currently spearheads the education and infrastructure vertical at Brandcom Public Relations Madison World. We're honored to have you here with us today for the Media Talk 2019. Welcome, sir.
Fantastic to see, how Christ has grown since 2008, and it's almost a privilege to be here speaking to this bright young audience on a Saturday afternoon. It's not too often that I see it in the corporate landscape, right? I mean, Saturdays are times when you would probably, just number off. Yeah? Great. So, a question to you out there, what would you guys have done over here? You can throw up any kind of response that you would wish to. Would you have helped? Well, this is 2010, Haiti, Central America, when it's one of the poorest countries in the world, and this is a 15-year-old girl, Fabienne Christine. She was stealing a couple of chairs and I believe a couple of photo frames. The police caught her stealing, and instead of probably arresting or and she's still a teenager, right? So juvenile. So instead of arresting her or giving a warning, the police officer shot point blank. And this is what happened after that. A bunch of global journalists, around 14 journalists, they just stood over there. They came to the point and they started clicking the pictures. It was one of the best photographs to be clicked, and it got awarded. But 2 months down the lane, there was another photographer who came over there and who released this picture saying that, is it right of media to have been a spectator? But there is again the other question, which is that the media at the end of the day was informing, and had it not informed, probably the story wouldn't have gone out in a similar manner. So why is it a practitioner and an observer's perspective? So when I started doing a bit of research on what is it that the latest trends and the latest kind of arguments that are coming across in media ethics, what I found is there's a lot of material available, a lot of books written, a lot of academic work, a lot of industry work. But what lacks is a perspective. I mean, what would you do where? And hence, from a practitioner's point of view, so I started off as a journalist with CNBC TV 18 and then went on to ET Now. And I would see that the kind of issues that we would face every day, not essentially hardcore ethical, but still, it would definitely be borderline. And then, on the other side of the line, as a PR professional and as a public affairs professional. So hence, it's a perspective that I have brought over a period of around 10 years, a decade, of what I learned, talking to people, understanding viewpoints. Also, ethics is not something which is quantifiable, right? It's not white or black. I mean, every person's threshold line is very different. So what do you do under such a circumstance? How do you create a standard set of practice? It's almost an impossible task. It's almost as impossible as administering a country of 1.3 billion. Yeah, to be or not to be, to report or not to report. This is a photograph that was taken in 1968 by Eddie Adams. I'm sure Gayatri would be knowing about it. It's one of the most famous photographs ever to have been clicked that ended the Vietnam War. And Eddie Adams, in his interview, he said that through this photograph, I killed 2 people. The general killed the commando, the Viet Cong commando, and I killed the general, with my camera. And through the course of his lifetime, Eddie went on to say that this is not the best of his work. His best work is something else. But there were a lot of things that were, it's historic. It's historic. And the general in picture who has the pistol shooting the commando, he migrated to the US and he opened a restaurant. And through his lifetime, he had to bear a lot of abuses from people, and people used to come and tell them that we know who you are, right? But at the end of the day, it was someone reporting. Eddie was reporting, right? But from whatever I read and from whatever I understood, Eddie was quite guilty about it, and he suffered psychologically as a result of this picture. And hence, what I understood is that it's not an easy place to report as is. And once you report as is, it gets even more difficult when you are being judged. But probably something that stands true is the facets of ethical reporting are accountability, ensuring that whatever you're saying or whatever you're capturing is accurate. Also, you do it in a manner that has integrity, as Harish was mentioning a while earlier, and upholding independence. Now, that is something which is a huge topic, and I will cover a bit of it, because independence is something that is slowly, it's becoming a dinosaur. Because as you see more consolidation happening in businesses and big tech coming over, that is something which is almost, dying down. And also every individual by himself is becoming a media outlet of his or her own. So these are some of the themes that I would discuss. Well, another small anecdote from history. So between 1933 to around 1945, Associated Press, which definitely is one of the leading wires globally when it comes to breaking news first. There was this German researcher who came out with a report alleging that Associated Press was actually hands in gloves with the Nazi regime during Hitler's administration, Hitler's rule, and they had signed a document that suggested that they would report in a way that was in line with the Nazi administration, and hence they were the only foreign news agency that operated during that era. They could not have not done it without the so-called yes of the administration. What did AP do at that time? I mean, AP already has a directory and already has an established set of ethical framework, which starts by saying that we are the Associated Press, and we have a long-standing rule setting in the industry standard for ethics in journalism, right? But somehow there have been a lot of reporting around that issue. What AP did in around 2016-2017 is that they came out with an internal finding that was obviously third-party, verified, and they said that the researcher Schanberg's assertions appear to be in contrast to AP's reporting standards. So while it was somewhere in the grey, they came out clean. Something that happened even more amusing in 2012. AP became the first global news agency to start reporting from North Korea. They could open a bureau in North Korea. So again, those kind of questions came up. Now the thing is that over here, the journalists at AP or the reporters at AP, the kind of questions that they are having to answer to the stakeholders, which is largely the civil society, which is largely the audience like you, people like you, is that, am I just reporting, or am I also partnering in bringing about a change or doing something better from the situation that I am in? But is it really the question of or is it really the purview of the reporter or purview of the journalist or the media host? That is something which I believe that it wouldn't be justified if I bring about my kind of approach, but it's more of a question to the audience, and hence the question always lies to report or not to report. Well, we live in interesting times. And what we are seeing is that, with the proliferation of technology adoption over the last decade, each of us has become a media agency. Each of us has become a media outlet. Be it social media or be it citizen journalism that is, empowered through the web, or be it anything else, or be it a blog. I can report. I can talk about it. I can publish my own findings, my own thoughts. What do you do in such kind of a setup? Like, what is the extent of, an ethical framework? who sets the ethics? I mean, if I am a media organization, it could be, either some kind of a governing body, it could be an ombudsman, or anyone else for that matter. But what do you do when it comes to the citizens? Can the government have a diktat over what can be published, what cannot be published? I'm sure that's not what it is, right? So it's a complex question. So what I understood is that each of us as individuals, if we report, if we speak, if we communicate something, there's a certain degree of credibility or a certain degree of accountability that we would need to bring in. Otherwise, it's very easy to spread a wildfire. So, it's pretty much like an ostrich, that puts its head inside the ground to search for food. And there's a lot of food on Facebook and any other medium. A lot of my peers over here, they brought up the issue of fake news. This has been an issue that has been, increasing in reportage over the past few years. And most interestingly, the way that it has evolved is very different, right? Like what Harish was mentioning in terms of, a cheetah being spotted and being shown on a television to a cheetah being in your WhatsApp group, right? From an open medium to a closed medium, wherein, your stakeholders are select and you almost understand that who is receiving your message, who is consuming your message, and what is he or she making out of your message. The effectiveness has increased, hence the threat has increased. So this is a caricature from somewhere around the end of 19th century. And this would be somewhere around the time when The Sun, which is a tabloid in the UK, that was, increasingly it was, being read by the commoners in England at that time. So fake news was pretty much relevant over there also. The next slide would be interesting. Any guess what exactly would this be? What kind of a graphic is this? Any guesses? I know it's lunchtime, but still. No? Well, this was published in The Sun around the mid-19th century, and this is how the moon looks. Right? So an astronomer sitting somewhere in Cape Town in South Africa had a very powerful telescope. And from his telescope, he saw how the moon looks. And this is the description of the moon. And this led to a lot of, discussions within the circles that read The Sun, and that's how they thought the moon looks like. Right? Until we really got glimpses of how the moon is. So that is fake news from the 19th century. Yeah? Yeah, so why is this happening? I mean, why are we seeing that there is more uncurated, unverified information that is landing at our doorsteps, on our eyeballs, into our ears, and any other senses that we. One thing is, media is being increasingly democratized. As I told you, that we are all, media by ourselves. Our smartphones are, pretty much a studio, a radio, and anything else that you may want to, talk about. One is rise of big tech. As a disclaimer, I'm not against big tech. I love Amazon. I'm not on Facebook though. I love LinkedIn, and I love any other big tech company. They are doing a lot of good work, definitely. But at the same time, what has happened is technology has evolved in a manner which is way faster than what governance and policy making could ever have done. What this has led to is that, governments, policymakers, civil society, and even consumers like us, we are grappling as in the speed with which we are being bombarded by information. We don't have the time to verify an information. We leave it up to, so-called professional. We may act on it or we may not act on it. What happens is that when we decide to act on it, the situation becomes quite grave, right? Because if I'm acting on something that is not verified or something that is not true, and it's not the right thing to do, right? The second one, ineffective business models. What has happened is that, newspapers around the world, they are facing a real tough time, or newspapers or any other media, the conventional media, what I mean to say. The conventional media, newspapers, broadcast organizations, they are facing a tough time to keep the business models alive. Because that's not the way advertisers are working anymore, right? I mean, at the end of the day, how is it that you keep, a lot of my peers spoke about, independence in media. It's definitely the place to be. Independence is definitely desired. But how do you run it as a business model? So that is the pervading question actually. That's exactly what I understood by studying that. Actually, ethics is pretty much correlated to the way in which you can deliver accountable information in a way which makes commercial sense also. So ineffective business models such as increasing cost of newsprint, declining readership, people consuming news in different manner, these have actually rendered the conventional models quite useless. Come to the next one, shift towards private platforms. What we saw, at least when social media proliferated, or when these websites such as Alt-Right, The Wire, Quads, when these started coming up, we saw that there was a lot of increase in readership base. And if I look at a country like India, it will still keep increasing because at the end of the day, internet penetration is increasing in India. The consumer's buying power is increasing, and hence, the experiential, the leadership, consumption is increasing. So that is going to keep increasing. But at the end of the day, what is happening is that people are shifting towards private platforms. You are no more wanting to, spread unverified information just on, say, your Facebook page, or maybe, a Twitter handle of yours. You would rather want to do it in a closed way, like probably you would select the recipients in Facebook, or you would want to select the recipients in a WhatsApp group, and that's how you would disseminate fake news. What that does is that, just imagine, right, like I'm sure that in this August audience, many of you would be in many different groups on WhatsApp. But when you form a group when you probably have a kind of accountability, a kind of proximity to a certain person. What that also means is that you trust that person to some extent. And when that person sends you certain kind of an information, there's a likelier chance that you may want to actually accept it than probably not accept it. And that becomes the more dangerous part of fake news. Hence, what probably is required it's more of an advocacy, and it's more of a desired prescription, is that probably when you read any kind of information, no matter how sensational or how earth-shaking it is, probably stop for a while, for a few seconds, and think, is it or is it not? And just maybe probably think about it, cross-verify if you have sources, or maybe just leave it over there. Don't try to if it's unverified, don't try to pass it on. The other is that of proliferation of smartphones. Yes, India is growing at around 7+% of GDP growth year on year. We are a $1.3 billion country, a great consumer story. Definitely, the Superman after China. But that also means that, as aspirations increase, as consumption increase, there's also a need for people to be more educated about these things. Hence, as you saw, that those are some of the, so-called democratization of media that is leading to certain kind of issues or certain kinds of situations wherein the framework is beyond the purview of, say, a conventional media organization. But what that also means is that we saw what happened with Cambridge Analytica a few years back, right? I mean, the entire fiasco led to Donald Trump being elected as the head of the most powerful state on earth. I wouldn't blame it on Trump when it comes to populism or instability, political or economic instability, because that was coming up even way before Trump was there. If I have it right, it started as way back in around 2005, 2006 in Austria, when the extreme right wing got elected. And those were the early trends that the world is moving slowly towards more of a populist kind of a mindset. I wouldn't use the word extremist, but in terms of a kind of mindset where people would rather follow the leader who's authoritarian, a benevolent authoritarian, if I may say so, and that has only increased, right? Skepticism towards traditional and new age media. This is something that we have been seeing, and this is a good sign actually. Although much of it is happening, I wouldn't so-called stereotype it as by saying it the West, but it's more happening in countries where literacy levels are high. What we are seeing is that when people are consuming news via different media, it could be traditional like say a newspaper or television, or it could be something like a new age such as say a Facebook feed or maybe for that matter a website. But people have started questioning. They don't have too much faith in the media, and this is the result of the post-Cambridge Analytica era that we are seeing. Distinction between newsprint and news interpretation. What has happened is that say something like a conventional news organization, and mostly I would say a television, they are good at breaking news. But when it comes to interpretation of news, that is where the social media is playing such an important role. What this means is that people, as I was saying, that each of us is a media of our own. When we start interpreting as so-called pseudo experts, what this may lead to, we are not quite aware. The fallout effects can be something that is not desired. So I would rather hold the word than spread it out. But definitely that is something which is happening. We are seeing that newsbreak is something that is being done by the conventional media and the new age media, but at the same time news interpretation is something that is more under the purview of social media, where people are discussing current affairs, issues, scoops. So it's quite interesting to see that how over the years I have personally seen the way in which journalists, readers, and the civil society has been treating information, and even government. Something that I would like to point out over here is that since 2014, I have been working closely with certain state governments and ministries in the central government. I have seen a massive shift in the way that the government operates. It's not necessarily earlier. In 2014, I would necessarily see that I would have to actually go with the communique, get the communique vetted to the press officer, and then the press officer would say that I want it in Times of India. That doesn't happen. That doesn't happen. The press officers and governments don't actually care too much about Times of India. Of course, Modi doesn't need any press officer. He is a press officer by himself. But the government would rather say that it's okay. I don't need to be on the front page of a newspaper. I may as well be on the on some of the websites that have a better kind of my target audience, capture audience. I would as well direct the information over there. The government is getting smart. It's getting there. So this is from the Edelman Trust Barometer 2019. Edelman, one of the world's largest reputation agencies. So they come out with the Trust Barometer every year, and this is what they saw, and it's very interesting to see that over the 19 years, the way public perception has, evolved. If I were to see from 2018 to 2019, it's very interesting that people who are consuming news or avid consumers of news have increased by quite a margin within a year. People are reading more. But then this also means that when people are reading more, there's a chance that any kind of a misinformation would be having a larger implication, right? So there are various ways of interpreting this particular slide as well as the entire report in itself, and that in itself would actually warrant quite a bit of time. But for paucity of time, hence I say the word credibility paradox. So if people are increasingly reading news, conventional news platforms or news on social media, why is it that skepticism is rising? So that's a paradox. From the Reuters News Institute, so there's definitely a concern about misinformation and disinformation, and around 55% of the sample in Reuters Institute, they were concerned about the ability to separate what is fake and what is real. So that's quite a lot. So this is so this was some kind of, after much introspection, I thought what it would be, because at the end of the day, we live in a world that loves to quantify. So if I were to measure ethics, and this is a question probably, to the researchers over here who would like to research on how do you quantify a metric like ethics. So it would actually somewhat look like this. Accountability times self-regulation, the whole plus responsibility. But how do I actually quantify these things? So this is a question which probably would take years of research, but this is something that I probably am, probably able to introspect. So something, for my kind, what is the kind of framework within which, PR needs to function? Something that we should do is that we should stop just taking information passively. We understand as PR professionals, I'm here at the center. On one side of me is the client, on the other side are my other external stakeholders to whom I have to feed a certain kind of information or influence. But the point is that when my client is not giving me the real, I wouldn't use the word truthful, but I'm saying the real honest information. Of course, I'm going to actually not pass it on the real information to, the external stakeholders. So for us as PR consultants, it is extremely necessary to ask questions to our clients to get the right kind of brief. That is extremely important to be as consultants and not as servicing executives for our clients. We are not servicing executives. We are consultants. Just as you don't lie to your lawyer and your doctor, do not lie to your PR consultant also, should be the word in the industry, right? Be partners in countering fake content. We are powerful people. I believe that, PR is a very powerful profession. We are at the crossroads of where, what needs to be spoken is spoken. So what needs to be spoken is the true word, is the right word, even if it's not something desirable. What is desirable is that if something untowardly has to be spoken on behalf of a client, it is my job as a consultant to see to it that that needs to come out in a proper fashion. It's like Anna Kournikova who actually said that, yes, I had taken some kind of drugs. Right? Or advocate inclusiveness among stakeholders. We are in touch with journalists and every other kind of, profession that is to do with, dissemination of information or interpretation of information. We need to always be partners with them in showcasing what is right, what is not right, and not just go and give a press release and say that, just get this published. No, that's not what our task is. Then we are not being true to our profession and we are not being honest. And balanced views between clients and stakeholders. As I said, the consultant mindset is very important. Have a consultant mindset and not of a servicing professional. You're not there to say yes, sir. You're there to say this is this and I'm an expert and this is what I have to do. That's it from my side.
Thank you so much for those thought-provoking words. May I now request Professor Alex Joseph to give the token of appreciation to Mr. Sumantra.